Thank you so much for having me. So, as introduced, I'm going to be talking about channel testing and how we can utilize influencer marketing and the relationship it can have with your paid ads. So, just a real quick agenda. I'll have a real quick intro, then talking about channel testing, talk about influencer marketing, link it up with some examples at the end, and I probably will talk a lot, but I put a point for Q&A. So the little intro, I'm Caitlin Hill. I've been working in performance marketing, specialized in apps for 8 years. A big specialty for me is paid marketing. And this is relevant. I am a begrudging TikTok enthusiast, and you will see why I've mentioned it later on. But that's my dog. He does work with me. That's my office as well. So he's my performance marketing assistant, and he said I'm definitely good at it. So channel testing. So just a quick one. I know it's self-explanatory, but just to break into what does channel testing mean? Why do we do it? Why am I talking about it? Channel testing is essentially when we're researching and we're testing paid campaigns across multiple different advertising sources. So if we look at paid social, for example, we could be testing on Meta, which has Facebook and Instagram. There's Snapchat, there's TikTok. There's a lot of different channel sources. Also, on a paid search perspective, you've got Apple search ads. You've got Google App Campaigns, which is a bit of everything when it comes to it. And then you've got ad networks as well. So it's really important to diversify our channel mix and test. There's a couple different reasons why I say this. One of them is you can hit a glass ceiling so easily if you're just testing. If you have a large budget, you're just testing one channel. You're going to hit a glass ceiling where your costs are going to start rising. Your install to kind of lower funnel metrics could start dropping. There's a lot of different things that could come into play there. And also, a really big one is if you ever have an issue with one of your channels, so a perfect example at Glorify is we invest a lot in Meta, and for 2 weeks, for no reason at all, our account got suspended, which meant there was a lot of media spend we then had to push to other channels where this made up 80%. So we had to scramble a lot to make sure that we were still making that acquisition. If you diversify, if you're testing your channels, then you can kind of avoid that happening because you've got a lot of different sources. Another reason really is because this is just a little example. Obviously, 2 of these channels are within one advertising channel platform, but if we break out the different demographics of the social platforms, they're not all the same. They might seem the same. They might have the same things. Instagram typically will get TikTok videos maybe a year later, but in general, they are super, super different. If we break down the ages, I'm not going to talk through everything because it's on the screen. If we break down the ages, like you have a lot younger demographic on TikTok than you do on Facebook, but one thing I think is super interesting, and especially if you're looking at a brand perspective, is that TikTok, the average user spends 95 minutes on it. Now, that's probably the low ball for myself, but if you think about when you're advertising on TikTok, when you're using organic posts, people are going to see it quite frequently comparatively to the other channels because of how much they spend on it. So I rushed through that real quick. So some considerations, which is a little bit bigger of a slide. One is there is not a one-size-fits-all, especially when it comes to channel testing. Think about your own personal company goals for your paid marketing and also for your general marketing. What's your brand awareness goals? What's your owned impressions? A lot of different KPIs. For example, in our paid marketing, we look at account creation as one of our really biggest metrics. So a big thing we look at is our install percentage to account. So we know how many people are actually becoming genuine users. But that is really going to impact what different channels you're testing and kind of your strategy around it. This one's a really big one in terms of conversion rate because the tests are my examples at the end are going to link a lot more back to conversion rate. But conversion rate definitely can have a expense at your cost per install. You might find that there's some channels where the actual top of funnel acquisition is a lot more expensive, but the value that you're bringing is a lot better than some of the lower cost per install. So it's about kind of finding that blended, finding that little pattern between them, finding that little sweet spot. But it's a big consideration. Researching your market, super important. I'm not sponsored by anyone, so I'm not going to mention any specific tools, but ASO tools, for example, you can use it to kind of spy on the paid side of your competitors, get an idea of what are they investing in, how long have they been investing in it. 2 tools I am going to mention are to the side there. Probably have seen them before. Ad Library on Facebook, pretty basic. You just search your competitor, you'll find what they have live. The TikTok one makes me more excited because there's a lot more discoverability when it comes to your competitor research. So you can do the same thing. You could type your company in and see what they're running on TikTok. But if you want a bigger kind of variety in terms of like looking into sector, you can go by your country, you can go by your industry. The big one that I get excited for is the objective. A lot of the times on Ad Library, you kind of have to read between the lines on what's their call to action and does the ad look like an app ad, but it won't necessarily be obvious, whereas on the TikTok Ad Library, we can actually filter for the objective, which means that we can really be looking at what are the app install specific ads. A couple more things I just want to say on this page is that especially when you're testing different social channels, just because an asset works on one channel doesn't mean it's going to work for another. Just linking back to what I said to do with the different demographics, there's a lot of different age groups that are going to respond differently to ads. The different platforms, TikTok uses a lot more native than we would see on Meta, for example. So that's something, a really big one to take in mind, is you can't necessarily recycle an asset from one social platform to another. So research, that kind of links into these nicely there, researching. And the last two, really quick. When we're testing, a majority, these channels are algorithm-led. They are optimized with data. So if you're making a very snap decision and saying that a test doesn't work, you're probably not going to get that many learnings, and it's not going to really develop, and you're not going to find that many channels that work. I'll kind of go into that a little bit more when we were evaluating a test for ourselves. But yeah, that's something to really keep in mind, is you need time. You need sufficient time to really assess whether it's working. And budget always helps as well. Assessing how much budget you're putting into things. Obviously, the more data you can get in a short amount of time, the more optimization you can have. But thank you. Utilizing influencer creatives. So I'm sure most people in the room know what influencer marketing is, but a really quick definition. Influencer marketing is basically the relationship that we have as a company that we set up with an internet figure. I didn't want to write the term influence again because I thought that was a cop-out. So an internet figure is just anyone on any platform that has a significant amount of following. Now, we have micro and we have major, so that could be 1,000 followers, that could be 1 million. There is a lot of testing, a lot of sweet spots between them. And the reason why I'm talking about this is it is super crucial if you already have these relationships, if you're already looking into your influencer marketing, how we look at repurposing that content and really look at utilizing it for paid activity. And I think in some contracts that can be a little bit overlooked. For Glorify, that is something that we weren't necessarily looking into at first. And it can help you later on, which I'll explain. So why am I talking about this? Why is it important? Number one, these videos are authentic looking because they are made. This is an example. And now, to save a little bit of time, none of them are playable. These are stills. You're going to have to trust me on what they look like. They're not playable, but this is an example of an influencer ad that we were running on TikTok. We were also running it on Meta. It looks so much more native, so much more reliable, and that's because it is a native. She posted this on her organic TikTok. It was made for the platform, and thus it has a lot better reception to it. So, and the other part about this is, I think something that I found across the board is that it's quite difficult in terms of resource of creative. That can be a bit of a pain point in a lot of companies I've worked in. If you already have influencer marketing, it's such a quick win because you already have this content being produced. Most of the time, you might need a couple quick edits, you might need a call to action, but the actual video is there. You don't need to get a studio, you don't need to get new people to be recording it. You have this relationship and you have this content. So I have a point there on Spark Ads, but that's actually my next bit. Now, talking about TikTok, I am very, very, very enthusiastic about this tool called Spark Ads. If you don't know what they are essentially ads that are generated from organic content that has already been posted. So it's been posted either on your own brand company's TikTok page or with an influencer that you're working with. So this is really easy. Once it's already been posted, you can generate a code that will have a time length that the code is valid, and it pulls into your ad manager. Really simple. It pulls everything in. So a big thing is that you have all that organic engagement. So when you're thinking about people trying to not break away from thinking it's an ad, you have a lot of organic engagement already, presumably depending on what ad creative that you're using, which adds a lot more reliability. There's also, it's really great if you are establishing relationships with influencers. This is a really great tool because What Spark Ads do is, and what makes them different to kind of Meta and boosting posts, is that we can put an app install objective, we can put an acquisition objective against them, which is really awesome. We can't do that on Facebook. We can just do brand awareness. We can just do it for impressions. We can do it so the algorithm is optimizing to install. Why that's awesome is it also optimizes all of that engagement. This is the actual video, organic video. So any comments on the ad goes to the actual video. Any views go to the video. It increases virality in your brand or the influencer. So the reason why this could be used is in contracts with influencers, they can be very expensive, depending on who you're using. But this can be a very good bridge, because essentially you're making a kind of a contract where we're spending this amount of spend on you for you to get that attention. We get that asset in turn for the ad. So it can make a really, really nice little synergy between your influencer and your paid. This is a fun one. If you're not chronically online like me, you're not going to know who this is. But this is just to contradict myself really quickly, authenticity, not always guaranteed. This TikToker is a beauty guru called Michaela. The big thing about her, just to condense it, is that halfway through a sponsored video for mascara, she put false lashes on. And people called it out, people noticed it. There's two waves around the marketing of it, like, oh, that's genius of L'Oreal, because now everyone's going to buy it so they can see whether it does work or not. In my humble opinion, I think it's really bad for the brand. It lacks authenticity, and even if they have a burst in sales, it's probably going to plateau after that. Their burst in sales is purely just to see if the product is bad. So that's not really necessarily the sales that you want, but she's quite prominent. So to kind of summarize from her is that if your organic post isn't authentic, your paid ad is going to be even worse, because if you're not already starting, this was an organic post, well, sponsored ad, but it wasn't on an ad. So starting off with this, if they were then to use this for an ad, the performance would be abysmal. The comments they would get on it would be abysmal. A couple other things to consider is checking in your agreements. It's not necessarily already written that you can use it on paid ads, and for us, it wasn't. So we had to really iron in that we wanted usage rights. Usage rights typically have timescales as well. So that can be a bit frustrating in two ways. Creative fatigue over time, so you don't want to pay for a creative, you don't want to extend it and pay for time that you're not using, because it's not going to work forever. But your top performers, on the flip side, might also have to be paused, because you have a legally binding contract. So it means if you're not going to extend usage rights or pay that influencer, once that usage right's over, you have to pause it out. It's not, oh, please, can you give me a week to just like ease in our next creatives? We have to just pause it all out. We've had that issue in the past as well, so it's definitely something to look at, because that will then inflate your overall campaigns. Cool, I have 2 minutes, so I'm going to be really, really quick. So this was an initial test that we did at Glorify. It was when we started channel testing for TikTok. So what we did is our biggest channel was Meta, so we were using that as a bit of a comparison. Our objective was to grow a new social channel, support the growth of our organic channel. A big problem was that Meta was previously using like around 80% of our media spend. It was a really large amount, and as I said, we had a pause at one point, and it meant that we then didn't have media spend for 2 weeks. So what we found is, if we look at the top of the funnel, wasn't amazing at first. So we had a 22% increase in our cost per impression, a 4% increase in our cost per install. But what we did find when we looked down funnel is that it was considerably better. In terms of the actual conversion rates that we were getting a lot better in terms of quality. And one thing to keep in mind is when you're comparing, these two channels were at different spends. So I compared it to a time where Meta was at a similar spend, because it's another thing that would be not fair. The conversion rate might look worse on Meta because it's at a considerably higher budget. So you want to be comparing as kind of fairly as possible. So just really quick one here. This is another case study. So after the channel testing, what we did was test on both Meta and TikTok, two A/B test of our user-generated actor-led content versus the influencer. What the key difference between them is the actor-led was scripted, it's a lot more polished, it was in a studio, whereas the influencer one was just film to phone, not polished, rough edits. What we found was, across the board, amazing results compared to our actor-led UGC. Top of funnel, major drops in cost. Lower funnel, major drops in cost. Conversion rate, 31%. Now, increase. Now, what that means in terms of us at Glorify is that was about an 80% install to account creation. So we were getting very high quality users from these ads. Yeah, and this is just a really quick one. I'm not going to talk through all of it because I know I am time, but this is just where you can go with your testing afterwards. This was, these 2 ads were on Meta and on TikTok. All we did was A/B test those text boxes, and we had dramatically different results from Facebook and Meta and TikTok. As you can imagine, the sun, it didn't work very well. It didn't look native, but the text box, as you can imagine, because it was actually on Meta, it was actually on TikTok even. It was a lot better. And the only other big thing I would say in terms of organic growth is that we managed to go from 3,000 followers, and I don't have a slide here, 3,000 followers to over 100K within a month, and that was supported by Spark Ads. So it can really be impressive for your organic growth whilst delivering acquisition. But yeah, thank you for listening. I did not give any time for questions, apologies, but that is my cat, and he thinks it was a pretty good presentation. So thank you.